72 against 10,000, not a ratio, a death sentence. For 3 scorching days in the merciless desert furnace, 72 warriors carved their legend from blood and sand. What force holds men to ground when every instinct screams, flight? What sacred oath, what burning rage makes flesh stand against an approaching storm of steel? This wasn't merely battle, but the final defiant heartbeat of a resistance condemned before it began. The moment when unshakable faith collided with unstoppable empire, and neither yielded. Their blood didn't redraw borders, it saturated memory itself. Their swords didn't conquer land, but time. Though their names now whisper through history's corridors, this is how 72 mortal souls achieved immortality, facing oblivion not with desperate hope, but with scorched throats, howling challenge, parched lips snarling defiance, and blades raised against the impossible. The world they stood against had a face, a title, a hunger devouring resistance like desert wind consumes water. Caliph Yazid, master of the vast Umayyad Empire, embodied not chaos, but calculated order imposed without mercy. To him, unity demanded silence, compliance, complete erasure of dissent. His legions were not mindless hordes, but professional killers, disciplined enforcers of his brutal vision. Under his shadow marched the army of Umar ibn Sa'd, a general torn between sacred duty and eternal damnation, who sought not blood, but a peace purchased through annihilation. His orders left no room for interpretation. Exterminate the rebellion to its last breath. Across the blistering sands he now approaches, 10,000 synchronized footfalls behind him, moving inexorably toward a speck on the horizon where 72 parched throats refuse to cry. Surrender, 72 souls clinging not to mere survival, but to something far more dangerous in this world of absolute power, unbreakable principle. They stand at Karbala, not by accident, not by chance, but by choice. A cracked plain of dust near the banks of the Euphrates where survival is a mirage and the sun a merciless executioner. Here, Husayn ibn Ali plants his banner in defiance, grandson of the Prophet, heir to morale rather than political legacy. His authority commands no empire, only loyalty forged in blood and conviction. Around him gather brothers, sons, friends, and freed slaves. Not just warriors, but living testaments, each man acutely aware that death encircles them like vultures. But they do not run, they do not beg for mercy. Instead, they sharpen blades already dulled by the arduous journey, mend leather armor with bleeding fingers, whisper fervent prayers to a sky too vast, too indifferent. Night falls, bringing no comfort, only the certainty that dawn will usher in siege and slaughter. They know their bodies will fall, their blood will soak this parched earth. But that, Husayn reminds them with eyes burning brighter than the desert stars, is not their purpose. Their purpose is standing when all others kneel, speaking truth when silence buys life. Even if heaven remains silent to their pleas, the unborn generations of humanity will echo their names for centuries to come. Dawn hisses across Karbala like an opening wound. Orange light slices through dust clouds, revealing the grim theater of what is to come. The Umayyad forces stretch across the horizon, their banners like rows of executioners' hoods fluttering above armored ranks that gleam like scales of some vast predatory beast. In their midst stands Umar ibn Sa'd, sweat already beading beneath his commander's garb, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth, eyes betraying the torment of a man whose ambition bought him command but sold his soul. He watches the humble encampment across the field, so small against the vastness of his army, motionless in the early light, as if already transformed to memorial. His fingers trace the hilt of his sword, a gesture more habit than intent, while something hollow expands in his chest. Some part of him still hopes Husayn will surrender, that this sacred soil might be spared the coming flood of blood. But the commander in him coldly memorizes every dip in the plain, every potential bottleneck, calculating how to strangle resistance with minimal losses. Miles away in Damascus, Yazid reclines on cushions of imported silk, waiting not for news of negotiation, but confirmation of obliteration, sipping sweetened water while those he condemned go thirsty. He has no use for martyrs or their inconvenient truths, only the silence that follows total victory. Yet across that bleak expanse, 72 men rise with the sun, bodies gaunt from days without water, faces hollowed from heat and heartbreak, each one tightening their belts against hunger's gnaw, wiping down blades already gleaming, preparing not for glory, but for the kind of sacrifice that echoes through millennia. Their children weep quietly in the tents behind them. Their women whisper prayers that tremble in the morning air. And still, not one walks away. The first arrow rends the dawn before the sun fully crowns the horizon, its wicked hiss a prelude to slaughter. It strikes a tent post near a sleeping child, wood shattering like bone. Then come the war drums, their rhythm ancient and merciless, a heartbeat designed to drown conscience, forcing even breath to surrender to their command. Umar ibn Saad raises his sword, hesitates for one haunting moment where history balances on a blade's edge, then slashes downward. The Umayyad ranks surge forward like a metal tide, shields locked, voices chanting death prayers that vibrate through the earth itself. Across the plain, Husayn stands at the front line, not protected behind ranks of followers, but where death will find him first. Beside him towers Abbas, his half-brother, muscles coiled beneath battle-scarred skin, eyes burning with such fierce conviction that men twice his number give him wide berth. The air transforms to vicious geometry, arrows crossing, slicing, finding homes in throats and chests where moments before prayers had formed. Blood sprays in delicate arcs, catching sunlight like rubies before darkening the sand. The 72 move as one organism, each man compensating for the other, turning weakness to strength, retreat to ambush. Where they lack numbers, they substitute precision. Where they lack armor, they offer unbreakable resolve. Each fallen comrade is not anonymous casualty, but brother, son, friend, their names called out in anguish even as their bodies are dragged to safety. Behind their thinning lines, children who hours before played with wooden swords now watch real blades steal fathers from the world. They see heroes transform into memory before their eyes, teaching them with each defiant stand what principle costs in flesh. The merciless sun climbs higher, cooking men alive in metal cauldrons of their own armor, sweat and blood indistinguishable now. Yet the 72 do not yield. They fight knowing victory is impossible, that their purpose is not conquest but testimony. Every moment they stand is itself the victory, every drop of their blood the ink with which history will write their truth against Yazid's crushing silence. As the sun reaches its pitiless zenith, shadows shrinking to nothing beneath the advancing Umayyad boots, Abbas seizes the moment of desperate necessity. Water is no longer luxury, but survival itself, their supplies deliberately cut off, their skins long emptied. Children now weep not from fear, but from the primal agony of parched throats, their tiny voices growing weaker with each passing hour. Abbas, his skin blistered and cracking beneath his armor, his powerful frame already weakened from days without water, mounts his steed with a cold determination that silences even the battlefield around him. The impossible stands before him, the gleaming ribbon of the Euphrates guarded by hundreds, yet he rides, not with blind hope, but with calculated fury. His charge tears through the first Umayyad line like divine wrath incarnate, his sword an extension of his will, carving a bloody path where none should exist. Arrows puncture the air around him, one finding his shoulder, another his arm, yet he does not falter. Bodies fall beneath his blade, men who yesterday were sons and brothers, now obstacles between thirst and salvation. When his right arm falls, severed by a vicious strike, he fights with his left. Blood fountains from his thigh, where steel finds flesh, yet still he advances, unstoppable as time itself. By some miracle of determination, he reaches the river's edge, the water glittering like heaven's promise mere inches from his parched lips. He cups the precious liquid in his remaining hand, feels its cool touch against his skin, his body screaming for relief. But Abbas does not drink, not a single drop. Instead, with trembling fingers, he fills the water skin for the children waiting in the camp, turns his horse, and charges back through the gauntlet of death he has already navigated once. He could have survived, could have slaked his burning thirst, could have chosen life over certain death. But here lies the true nature of sacrifice, not in the inevitability of dying, but in the sacred power of choosing. His return becomes legend with each strike, each wound, each man who falls before him. The waterskin, clutched against his body like something more precious than his heart, is pierced by an arrow just as the Husayn's camp comes into view. Water, life itself, seeps into the indifferent sand. They find him surrounded by the dead he has taken with him, his body broken but his face serene in death. In this crushing defeat, the 72 find transcendent strength, for in this realm of raw power and brutal authority, Abbas has demonstrated that something fiercer than survival moves in the hearts of righteous men, something tyranny can never touch, something empires break themselves against, something that speaks across centuries when empires are dust. His body remains on the battlefield, but what survives cannot be crushed or burned away, cannot be silenced by all the might of Damascus. What survives becomes the unbearable burden carried by all who witness such sacrifice, the knowledge that burns brighter than thirst. You must live worthy of such deeds. Night falls again, not as refuge, but as shroud over carnage. The sand lies saturated with blood, the air vibrating with echoes of the dead's final cries. Across the plain, Umayyad tents glow golden with firelight, soldiers methodically sharpening blades for tomorrow's inevitable slaughter, their laughter carrying on the desert wind. On Husayn's side, a different silence reigns, heavy with the weight of absence where prayers once rose. Husayn moves through the ruins of his camp, physically diminished yet spiritually unbowed, his face carved with grief, his gaze unflinching. He kneels beside each fallen brother, whispering their names like sacred incantations, gently brushing blood-crusted dust from faces that hours before had roared defiance beside him. Each loss carves another hollow in his heart, yet with every fresh wound of sorrow, his resolve crystallizes, his voice growing steadier, quieter, more certain. Inside his chest, where despair should consume him, something adamantine forms instead. The empire has taken his family, his mighty brother Abbas, even the water meant for his parched children, but it cannot take the truth that burns within him. He gathers the survivors by the dying embers, too few now for battle formations, yet enough for what truly matters. Testimony. Their faces, illuminated by flickering flames, are gaunt with hunger and thirst, but radiant with purpose. They speak not of revenge or glory, but of honor that transcends death. Not of distant gods, but of vows made flesh through sacrifice. Tomorrow will bring their end. They know this as certainly as their own heart beats. But tonight, they etch their names into the fabric of fate itself. Not one will surrender. Not one will break faith. This is no longer mere resistance against tyranny. It is remembrance incarnate, forged not of stone or scroll that time erodes, but of marrow, ash, and unbreakable will. Beyond the desert's edge, history sleeps fitfully, unaware that in the light of this final campfire, 72 mortal souls are branding themselves into the eternal consciousness of humanity. Dawn of the final day arrives, not with fanfare, but with a stillness so unnatural it stifles every breath. The wind itself retreats, refusing to witness what comes. Husayn steps forward alone, armor saturated with brothers' blood, framed by flame-scorched canvas and splintered shields that tell their own stories of resistance. Opposite him, the Umayyad force tightens formation, 10,000 blades gleaming with murderous intent, their synchronized movements revealing the mechanical precision of empire. Umar ibn Sa'd remains mounted above his men, face carved from desert stone, yet his eyes betray him, trembling as if already haunted by ghosts not yet created. Husayn does not beg, does not negotiate. He understands words have turned to ashes in this furnace of conviction. Instead, he lifts his voice one final time, not addressing his executioners, but the infinite sky above, the unborn generations who will one day sift through these blood-soaked sands searching for truth. His prayer becomes testament, his stance a challenge to tyranny across time itself. Then he charges, sword catching the merciless sun. Not one man behind him hesitates, their thinning ranks moving as a single body propelled by something greater than survival. The final clash transcends battle. It is flesh unraveling from bone, oath separating from silence, truth divorcing from power. Blades flash, shatter, and find homes in loyal flesh. Horses scream their terror into the indifferent sky. Husayn fights with the terrible serenity of a man who has nothing left to lose and everything left to prove. Each strike not meant to save his life, but to carve his truth into eternity. One by one they fall around him, their bodies creating a circle of sacrifice, each death another verse in the scripture of defiance. When at last Husayn himself drops to his knees, blood streaming from wounds too numerous to count, he does not cower or curse his killers. Instead, he looks toward the sun that has witnessed everything and whispers the name of every fallen companion, a final act of remembrance before the sword falls. The silence that follows rings across the desert, not peace but judgment, not conclusion, but beginning. It is story becoming legend, it is martyrdom transforming into revolution. And through the coming centuries, empires will rise and crumble to dust, while these 72 names continue to ignite hearts with their burning question. What would you sacrifice for truth? Their corpses lie scattered across Karbala, twisted in frozen defiance, sun-scorched and blood-caked, yet somehow luminous with terrible purpose. The Umayyad Empire does what empires always do, burying guilt beneath triumphant proclamations, trampling over sacred bodies to claim hollow victory. Women and children, now captives, are paraded through jeering streets in rattling chains, their flesh burning under the same merciless sun that witnessed their protectors fall. But something in their unwavering gaze unsettles even the most hardened soldiers, a silent testimony more potent than any battle cry. The children's eyes, aged beyond their years, reflect not defeat, but inheritance of an unbreakable truth. In his gilded palace, Yazid raises victory chalices that taste of ash, his triumph souring as whispers spread across his realm, not tales of imperial might, but of 72 men who made power itself tremble. Pilgrims begin arriving at Karbala within days, kneeling in blood-saturated sand, touching the earth as if it holds revelation. Centuries dissolve, empires crumble to footnotes, borders shift like desert dunes, yet Karbala remains, growing more potent with each generation. In every era, when the powerful demand submission, when integrity falters before violence, when voices break against authority, the 72 rise again in memory. Not commanding blind allegiance, but asking the question that haunts tyrants through millennia. When everything is stripped away, possessions, safety, even the promise of tomorrow, when only your soul remains unclaimed, would you kneel before temporal power, or stand for eternal truth? And somewhere in that blood-hallowed plain still lies Abbas's water skin, pierced and empty, its precious contents long absorbed into earth that refuses to forget. While history's relentless march continues, every grain of sand there carries a name that cannot be erased. every name still bleeding across time, staining comfortable consciences with their challenge. And so the tale circles back, not as myth, but as mirror. 72 against 10,000, not just the impossible, but the unforgivable in the eyes of empire. Their stand, never meant to be remembered, becomes unforgettable. Not through monuments constructed by kings, but through mothers whispering their names to children when the world grows dark, through prayers rising from oppressed hearts, through chants beneath moonlight miles from Karbala, where truth still spills from aching throats. And still, Abbas's waterskin lies buried in the earth, a vessel of sacrifice so complete it transforms into something sacred. Even now, 14 centuries later, the air above that scorched plain vibrates with an echo that will never fade. Not because they won. They did not. Not because justice immediately followed. It did not. But because in a world that demands compromise, they chose the unbearable burden of integrity. Their blood became the ink with which history writes its most enduring lessons. One by one, their names still rise like incantations from the lips of the persecuted, not just as remembrance, but as living covenant. That conviction, once declared in blood, doesn't drown beneath 10,000 marching feet. It survives, it guides, it illuminates paths through darkness when all other lights have failed, and every tyrant who dares believe otherwise will, in time, feel the tremor of their legacy carried on desert winds that whisper across continents and centuries. Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. Centuries later, when voices crack under oppressive regimes and protest becomes perilous, the name Karbala resurfaces not as distant echo, but as visceral instruction. Streets flooded with tear gas and terror see bloodied hands raising banners bearing Husayn's truth, his name whispered through split lips and broken teeth, painted on walls the state burns down but cannot erase from memory. In windowless interrogation rooms and bombed-out villages, among mothers cradling sons executed for speaking truth, the 72 transcend mere history. They become the living blueprint of resistance, their sacrifice burning through time with undeniable proof that integrity fused with principle outlives every weapon, every decree, every empire. Archaeological debates continue, historians argue methodologies, scholars struggle to extract precise facts from the sands, to disentangle myth from verifiable record, yet they concur on this essential truth. Whatever happened at Karbala refuses to remain entombed in the past. It pulses, raw and unrelenting, behind every act of conscience against overwhelming force. It resurrects each time a solitary figure stands before tanks, each time a journalist publishes knowing soldiers will come at dawn, each time ordinary people form human chains against batons and bullets. That remains their final, transcendent triumph, an unfinished testimony that breathes through centuries, compelling each witness to confront their uncompromising question. When your moment arrives, when comfort beckons one direction and conscience another, will your silence serve power, or will your voice, however faltering, join the eternal chorus of 72 who once stood parched and bleeding in a forgotten desert, stripped of everything but moral certainty, and chose to transform defeat into immortality? It ends not in silence, but in a breath held across time. The last stand at Karbala does not fade into obscurity. It transforms how we remember resistance itself. Not as victories carved in stone, but as truths etched in sacrifice, each droplet of blood a testament more lasting than marble or gold. In classrooms where young minds first grasp justice, in prison cells where conviction outlasts confinement, in protest chants surging through tear gas, in lullabies whispered across generations, the 72 warriors transcend death. Their stand becomes our compass, pointing toward moral truth even as the world tilts toward convenience and power, their sacrifice a flame that illuminates the darkest corners of compromise. When tyranny seems insurmountable, someone remembers Abbas refusing water while children thirsted, recalls Husayn's final prayer cutting through the battle cries, envisions 72 standing against thousands, not with the hope of victory, but with the certainty of purpose. The numbers may blur with time, but the feeling burns eternal in our collective conscience, that searing knowledge that under a sky that offered no miracles, 72 mortals stood so that all future generations might learn what it means to refuse submission in the face of overwhelming force. And there, in that desert that drinks memory deeper than rain, their final breath still lingers, whispering not just defiance against one tyrant long turned to dust, but an eternal invitation echoing across centuries. When your moment of truth arrives, come stand with us, so the final ember fades, not extinguished, but passed on into every clenched fist that dares to rise, every whispered name that defies oblivion, every soul that chooses sacrifice over silence. Karbala remains, not simply as place, but as a question etched in fire. What will you give when all that is left to give is yourself? This is why history looks back not in mourning, but in awe. Not because 72 died, but because they made death kneel to meaning. Their legacy pulses through veins of revolutionaries and whispers through prayers of the oppressed. It trembles in the throat of every soul who stands when commanded to bow. It is not frozen in the past. It is the breath before every act of courage, the tremor before every stand made alone against the many. It survives in children learning their names before their own history, in pilgrims who touch the blood-hallowed earth with reverence, in every choice made in darkness toward light. And while the storm of empire has long passed, the wind over that ancient plain still carries 72 voices, low and cold as prophecy. Empires forget. The earth remembers, and so do we. So the final ember fades, not extinguished, but passed on into every clenched fist that dares to rise, every whispered name that defies oblivion, every soul that chooses sacrifice over silence. Karbala remains, not simply as place, but as a question etched in fire. What will you give when all that is left to give is yourself? This is why history looks back not in mourning, but in awe. Not because 72 died, but because they made death kneel to meaning. Their legacy pulses through veins of revolutionaries and whispers through prayers of the oppressed. It trembles in the throat of every soul who stands when commanded to bow. It is not frozen in the past. It is the breath before every act of courage, the tremor before every stand made alone against the many. It survives in children learning their names before their own history, in pilgrims who touch the blood-hallowed earth with reverence, in every choice made in darkness toward light. And while the storm of empire has long passed, the wind over that ancient plain still carries 72 voices, low and cold as prophecy. Empires forget, the earth remembers, and so do we.